This video supported in part by 40 years ago, Atari released the innovative strategic space combat game Yars Revenge. We did battle with the Qotile, dodging his swirl, hiding in the neutral zone, chipping away at his shield to load the Zorlon Cannon and blast him out of the sky in a dramatic full-screen explosion. And now, during its 50th anniversary celebration, Atari has teamed up once more with developers Atom Vision and Sneaky Box to deliver a follow-up to that 2600 classic in Yars Recharge. Throughout this review, I'll be comparing this Recharge title to the original Yars Revenge, upon which it's based. If you create a follow-up to a legendary game like this, you must also carry the burden of comparison to said game. As with the previous Recharge title, Gravatar, Atari has started to step out of the neon vectorized art style comfort zone with a clean, simple style which makes all the elements in the game less virtual world Tron-like and much more tangible and relatable. Though there is still a geometric grid in the distance that comes in handy when you're trying to target that Qotile with your Zorlon Cannon. I find the overall art design to be sort of futuristic industrial. All those metallic domes and conduits in the background give me the vibe that maybe Yars Recharged is living next door to the Namco arcade classic Xevious. I also appreciate that the transition between levels is subtly reminiscent of that Yars Revenge full-screen explosion. Sound, though, is another matter. Once again, composer Megan McDuffie has provided a techno theme and soundtrack for Yars Recharge. And while great on its own, it does nothing to invoke the ominous drone which was such a signature part of the original game. And even if you love the music, you'll barely hear it. I only really noticed the theme in the menu screens, but otherwise it's drowned out by all the rapid fire and explosions. Yeah, I know, I could adjust the audio levels in the menu, but I'd only have bothered if the music did anything to create that Yars Revenge flavor of dread. Oh, and speaking of those sounds that drown out the music, the sounds here are serviceable, but they're mostly of that generic sort of bullet explosion variety. There was an attempt made to replicate that nibble sound from Revenge that kind of sounded like a little hammer chipping away at glass, but it's a bit more squishy and not quite there. Yars Recharged has its game mechanics rooted in the original, with a few notable deviations I'll get to in a moment. You control the Yar, a species evolved, as we know, from the common earth housefly. Though the sprite design looks a bit more wasp-like, but that's okay. Our antagonist, the Qotile, hides behind a segmented shield which you must shoot at or eat away in order to charge the only weapon capable of destroying your enemy, the Zorlon Cannon. Added to the mix this time, though, are a handful of lesser enemies called minor cores. These take the form of turrets and lasers which can be charged by the Qotile to fire on your Yar. But shooting and nibbling alone won't charge your Zorlon Cannon. After you've destroyed an enemy or segment of shield, little yellow energy dots are dropped and you must swoop in to collect them before they disappear. It's those dots that fill the Zorlon Cannon meter on the left side of your screen. Luckily, the dots are magnetically drawn to your Yar, so grabbing them is nearly effortless as long as you get in the general vicinity. Nibbling on shields or enemies, though, is the much faster way to charge that cannon than shooting anything. But it also exposes your Yar to greater risk as you get up close and personal with those enemies. Once the meter is full, the cannon and a protective neutral zone will appear. Fly your Yar into the cannon and release a couple of powerful blasts at the Qotile, minor cores, or pretty much anything to which you'd like to deal some heavy damage. Where the original Revenge was pretty much 2 repeating levels of increasing difficulty, Recharged has a ton of variety in its level design. I get the feeling the developers found they'd established this toy box of Yars elements and explored all the different and interesting ways they could be put together to create a wide variety of play experiences using the same simple rule set. Some levels even transcend a simple shooter to be more of an action puzzler, where you must determine how to clear out heavy shield segments before you can even try to take a shot at the Qotile. Fans of Revenge will quickly recognize that Recharged at its default difficulty moves at a much slower pace than its predecessor. That slower pace, though, is offset with way more bullets and swirls coming at you as the game progresses. And speaking of that Qotile swirl, you may be stunned to learn that shooting the swirl mid-air with your Zorlon Cannon has no effect on the health of the Qotile. This mechanic was a signature part of Revenge. It's a high-risk, high-reward maneuver that not only delivered higher scores, but it was the very way in which you could unlock that Yars Easter egg. Having the swirl here reduced to a glorified projectile is a misinterpretation of the nature of the Qotile. That swirl isn't meant to be a big bullet, that's the Qotile itself in swirl form. If I have the skill to peg it mid-flight, there should be a payoff, but there's not. As with previous Recharge titles, this is a single-life game where you're in quest of the highest possible score to climb the leaderboards. But there is a bit of forgiveness here. Your Yar starts each level with 3 hit points, so you can withstand 2 hits before you die, unless you're hit by that Qotile swirl, in which case, it's instant game over. And while you're working on that high score, you can consider enabling these score multipliers in arcade mode. Each one you turn on adds a bit of extra challenge, but also rewards you with a score multiplier at the conclusion of your game. Cool idea. Power-ups have been the cornerstone of the Recharge series, going all the way back to Missile Command. And they're present here in Yars, but they're no longer the focus of what makes the game Recharged. Power-ups appear anytime you destroy one of the minor cores, and the type of drop is directly related to the type of core destroyed. Kill a laser core, get a laser power-up. Like those energy dots, power-up drops are magnetically drawn to your player, so you'll kind of pick them up automatically without even trying. They're beneficial, of course. Burst fire or a railgun is always a help, but since nibbling on the shield or enemies is a far more effective method of charging your cannon, power-ups are not nearly so consequential to gameplay as in previous titles. It's also worth noting that you can actually have 2 power-ups in your inventory simultaneously, and each has its own duration meter that drains as it's used up, which is typically no more than a few precious seconds. There's nothing wrong with the power-ups in Yars. They just aren't the focus and aren't something you'll spend very many CPU cycles thinking about during a frantic game. Controls can make or break a space shooter like this, so I'm happy to report that the controls for Yars are intuitive, responsive, and well-tuned. No buttons required. Yars Recharged is a dual-stick shooter in the spirit of Robotron or Smash TV. The left stick steers your Yar around the playfield, while the right stick allows you to shoot in any direction, regardless of the direction you're moving. This title is described by Atari as having bullet hell properties. I generally think of bullet hell games as hundreds of projectiles on screen through which you have to kind of find a maze-like path without getting hit. Well, Yars isn't quite that hectic, though in later levels there's certainly a lot to keep your eye out for. I might go halfway and say Yars Recharge is more of a bullet purgatory type game. In addition to ammunition headed your way from Qotiles and minor cores, though, you should also keep an eye out for the edges of the screen, where a helpful glow will reveal inbound random waves of bullets to add into that mix. This is all to say that despite the busyness of the on-screen elements, not once in preparing for this review did I ever feel I got hit by something because the controls were not responsive or in any way imprecise. And in what is a first for a Recharged game, Yars even has a tutorial for not just the controls, but also the basic rules and mechanics of the game. It will autoplay on your first launch, but also can be replayed at any time from the arcade menu. To mix things up a bit, Yars also offers missions, which are pre-programmed standalone scenes where you come up against some of the most devious layouts anywhere in the game. Each mission is unique, and scoring is a combination of goals accomplished, speed, and remaining health. But in a bit of a twist, the mission leaderboard is cumulative and totals up your score across all completed missions. So just because you got lucky and aced one, your ranking is a representation of overall skill, which I think is a neat idea. And just in case missions weren't enough variety, local cooperative play is also available both in arcade and mission mode, each with their own dedicated co-op leaderboards. In co-op, you and a friend control your own Yar, both on screen simultaneously working toward the same goal and sharing a common score. No need to be a hero to boost your own score, you're purely working together. In arcade mode, if one player loses his Yar, he can get back into the game at the next level, provided the remaining player can complete the current level alone. I really love this flavor of co-op play because it encourages you to cheer your friend on to victory so you can re-enter the fray. I should note that the soundtrack seemed to occasionally drop out during co-op, but that's the sort of glitch that will likely be fixed in a future patch, so no big deal, especially since, as I mentioned earlier, the music is generally drowned out anyhow. And before we wrap up, I've got to give a shout out to the achievements. Their inclusion is par for the course in modern gaming, so no surprise there. But if you're a Rush fan, you'll probably have a knowing grin when you browse through the list. With all the criticisms I've leveled, you may think I didn't like Yars Recharged, but nothing could be further from the truth. Most of the things that bothered me here were areas where this game misses the target on the tone or signature components of Yars Revenge. And look, if you put Yars right in the title, comparisons to the original are both inevitable and appropriate. I think the bigger fan you are of the original, the more fault you may find in this iteration. Or if you are a fan, your reaction to Recharged may very well depend on what parts of the original made it a magical experience for you. And if you are a younger gamer, you should know that this is not your father's or maybe even your grandfather's Yars game. That being said, I'm going to give Yars Recharged 3.5 tokens out of 5. A couple of the very core elements of Yars Revenge have been lost or changed here, but in exchange, Atari has delivered a more diverse, more visually stunning, and ultimately more replayable version of my childhood favorite. If you're hungry for more, check out this video where I reveal 10 things you didn't know about the original Yars Revenge, or watch this review of another of Atari's recent Recharged games. Thank you so much for watching this review, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.